Good morning. I'd like to welcome each of you to the December 5th Informal Conference we're having today. And first on the agenda is emergency hearings.
So, Dr. Mack, do we have you with us?
Yes, we do. I have some background noise. So I'm going to have myself on mute.
All right, just for the record, I'm going to reflect that the following board members are present. And since this is an emergency hearing, which would count as a board forum, we have Dr. Rodney Richmond, Dr. Brian Jolly, Dr. Lenore Newsom, Dr. Clint Boone, and also have Dr. Debbie Mack virtually via Zoom. With that, okay with the chair, we will turn it over to Ms. Bales.
All right. We have 4 emergency hearings to do this morning. Maybe more than that. The first one is Manuel Hernandez, license number PT 11615. Mr. Hernandez was working as a pharmacy technician at the DeQueen Walmart on or about October 25th, 2023. He admitted during an investigation that he had processed his own returns on some Walmart merchandise, and he got back somehow through the transaction, he got back more money than he had paid for those items. And that was 3 separate transactions. Walmart terminated him on October 27th, and he has been charged with theft of property in criminal court and is awaiting trial. Based on the information that we've gotten, staff felt like public health and safety required an emergency suspension on Mr. Hernandez. And I will add, I did send him a voluntary surrender and got word back from his criminal case attorney that he was not willing to sign it due to any impact that it might have on that criminal case.
Okay, I would like to entertain a motion as to the will of the board.
If there's no additional discussion, I'll make a motion for suspension.
Do I get a second?
This would be an emergency suspension for us to ensure he's not pricing at a time when we have this, what we feel is validated theft from his employer. He would be able to come back at some point and basically request a lifting of that emergency suspension. It's not a permanent suspension. It's not a revocation. It's just saying he can't practice until basically if he wants to go to practice, he has to come back before the board.
Okay, any further discussion? Have a motion by Dr. Jolly, a second by Dr. Richmond, that we suspend this license. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The motion passes.
The next hearing we have is on Ashley Nicole Goodwin, pharmacy technician license PT 99891. No, 98891, sorry. She was a pharmacy technician working at Genoa Healthcare in Springdale. In September of 2023, Genoa opened a loss prevention investigation based on an unrelated investigation that they had done in another state. The loss prevention investigator recognized that the situation in the Springdale pharmacy fit a similar fact pattern that he had seen in this other state. So they pulled video footage at the Springdale pharmacy. They reviewed it. The footage showed Ashley Goodwin taking Concerta tablets from a filled prescription in the Wild Call area. They were, after reviewing many days of video surveillance, there were 31 instances of Miss Goodwin concealing medications from prescriptions in the Wild Call area, from dating from June 26, 2023 to September 29, 2023. There were also 3 reports from customers claiming to be short on their tablets from their prescription bottle. Ms. Goodwin was interviewed and admitted to taking ADHD medicine muscle relaxers, and benzodiazepines from prescriptions waiting for pickup. She was terminated from her position, and she was also charged with theft by law enforcement. And again, staff felt that public health and safety was at risk due to her theft of controlled substances and requesting an emergency suspension.
Okay, any discussion on this matter? I would like to entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. This is Debbie.
Okay, like you came in a little bit late, Dr. Mack, but, do you keep your you keeping your microphone on? Or not?
She has it off because
It's
Okay, gotcha.
kind of noisy.
Okay. In the matter of Ashley Goodwin, we have a motion by Dr. Richmond and a second by Dr. Boone. Any further discussion on the matter? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The motion passes.
The next hearing is on Barbara Whitlow. License number PT 99869. She was a pharmacy technician at the Cersei Walmart. On October 13th, 2023, she was terminated from her position at Walmart for violation of Walmart's alcohol and drug-free workplace policy. She was sent for a reasonable suspicion drug screen on September 9th, 2023, after displaying concerning behaviors. The drug screen results showed that she was positive for methamphetamine. And we had sent her a voluntary surrender in October, and she's not responded. And staff felt like the public safety and welfare was at risk, so we're asking for an emergency suspension.
Okay, do we have any further discussion on pharmacy technician Barbara Whitlow?
So was she fired by Walmart because she was impaired on the job, or was it because of a random drug screen?
Well, it wasn't random. They were worried about her erratic behavior that day. So they did a reasonable suspicion drug screen for her, and it came back positive. And so she was terminated for, I guess, violation of their drug-free workplace policy, because she was present on the job and under the influence.
So did they do a drug screen, or did they do a confirmation test?
I believe they did. Well, I have the report if you want to look at it.
I would. Okay, it's confirmation.
Yeah.
It's GCMS and
It wasn't just a dip screen or anything like that. It's I hate to say a real test. It was a real test.
well, there's a lot of people don't understand the difference between
I
a
know.
drug screen and a drug confirmation. So you don't want to take away somebody's license simply on the basis of a drug screen.
And there was no prescription to support that.
I'll see that again.
Not that we're aware of.
Generally, if for an employer, if there is a prescription present, it'd be blinded by the MRO. Where we would see it as investigators via subpoena, employers generally wouldn't.
Say that one more time, John.
So if there's a prescription present, generally a medical review officer would take care of that there was a justified reason for it to be in the system.
Okay.
So it wouldn't have shown up. It would. It would not. No, it'd be blinded.
It was also dilute,
But it's still there.
so the level could be higher, yeah.
Any additional discussion? I would like to entertain a motion, please.
I'll move that we suspend their license.
Second.
We have a motion to suspend by Dr. Richmond and a second by Dr. Jolly. Any additional discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The motion passes.
All right, the next case we have is on technician Jill Hammond. License number PT 14354. She was a pharmacy technician working at St. Bernard's Medical Center in Jonesboro. On January 14th, 23, she was arrested with possession of a Schedule 1 controlled substance and possession of drug paraphernalia, both Class D felonies. On March 31st, 2023, she entered a negotiated plea of guilty and was sentenced to 5 years suspended sentence. And the paraphernalia charge was no prost. And based on that drug conviction, we felt as staff that the health and safety of the public was at risk due to her methamphetamine possession. And so we seek an emergency suspension on her.
What was the charge again, Ms. Vales? The conviction, I'm sorry.
It was possession of controlled substance, D felony. And she was pled guilty to that and got a 60-month suspended sentence. And then the drug paraphernalia was dropped based on her plea to that methamphetamine charge.
So when was this? So she was arrested in January
Yes.
and then court case?
The court case was concluded in March.
Why
And I
don't we just-
believe she self-reported and called the board and asked what effect this would have on her license. And of course, we sent her a voluntary surrender, but we have not received it back from her
Why are we just now addressing this?
because she didn't self-report until way after the
We-
fact.
We did not know about January or March until much more recently.
Okay.
Had we known in January, we would have asked for a suspension then. Or had we known in March, we would have asked for it then.
That's what I would have thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
We hadn't been sitting on it.
Well, I guess it was more a rhetorical question.
Yeah, that's.
So because of this conviction, she can't even be in the presence of controlled substances, right?
Yeah, once you have a drug felony, you're a DEA waiver candidate.
Yeah.
So it's for her to work in contact with controlled substances. If her employer knows, which they should, she would have to have a DEA waiver or be a DEA registrant directly.
Okay.
Now, did you say that she was convicted because she had control of one, Schedule 1?
It's charges Schedule 1 or 2.
It's 1 or 2, I
Yeah.
think, on there, which it would technically be a 2 if it was methamphetamine.
I believe it was methamphetamine.
Because if it's meth, it's a 2 in Arkansas.
Right.
Any further discussion? I would like to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to suspend.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to suspend by Dr. Jolly and a second by Dr. Richmond. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The motion passes.
All right, one more. Heather Baker, license number PT 12647. She was working as a pharmacy technician at Kroger in Little Rock on Polk Street. She was terminated for theft of store products, which she admitted to after being confronted by the pharmacist. And we sent her a voluntary surrender in this summer and trying to track her down. We believe she had moved out of state. We don't believe that's the case anymore. but she did not return that voluntary surrender. So based on that information, staff felt, again, due to her theft, that public safety and health required an emergency suspension request.
Okay, any discussion on this matter?
What did Kroger, I mean, they fired her, but what did they find that she took? What was the,
It was several items. The one that they could prove and the one that she admitted to was some sort of food item. Apparently she was, on the clock, but she would kind of shop the store. And so they thought she was, sort of stealing time. Not really a reason to bring her, for a suspension on that. But then once confronted about the different items she had sort of shopped the store for, she didn't pay for them. And then, ate them or consumed them. So,
do we know a value?
it's less than $100, but I don't know an exact value. But there was one item she was actually confronted with, but they suspect there was more, but there was no, theft from the pharmacy of any drugs. Yeah. You want to read that?
Need something a little substantial.
Yeah.
We bring them in because theft of property is a disqualifying offense. We do bring them in because a theft of property is in our rules as a disqualifying offense to obtain or hold a permit. So
Well, if
because
her
theft
name
of-
happened to be Jean Valjean, then might have a different consideration.
Theft is theft.
Lenora, I'll make a motion to suspend and then she can always come before us.
Thank you. I get a second?
I'll second.
We're still reading,
Yeah.
the statement by the pharmacist. That's why it's a pause. Oh, on the matter of Heather Baker, we have a motion by Dr. Mack and second by Dr. Jolly that we suspend the license. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? You didn't vote?
I'll go with an aye.
The motion passes. Do we have any other hearings?
No, no more emergency hearings.
Okay, this concludes our emergency hearing.
Dr. Knight, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Y'all have a good day.
All right, thank you.
Debbie, I have one last thing. Go there. I have a request for authorization to that Board of Pharmacy oversight activity. With that, we just need authorization for our new inspector.
Moved.
Second.
Okay, we got a move, then a second. All in favor? Signify by saying aye. Any nays? The motion passes.
Thank you again, Debbie. Called up for our 9:30, 5-minute break. Get settled, come back to 9:30 for our. Understand.
Right, thank you.
Ms. Fess, you'll tell us who all we've got with us. If you want to introduce yourself, and also we'll do for Jordan online, if she can hear us as well.
Yes, my name's Andrew Criswell.
And Jordan?
I'm Jordan Carlton.
And I think that we have Scott Moore listed, but I think when we got
Yeah.
additional information, we dismissed him from this morning.
Dismissed based on some information we received late last week.
So you guys have under tab 1, and for Jordan and for Andrew, I'll explain this process just a little bit. We call this a board informal committee meeting. It is less formal than a formal hearing. We're here today based on a complaint with a med error. And here in a minute, the board members are just getting this information. They're going to probably read through the complaint and then talk to both of you, and staff will kind of give a brief overview of what exactly happened. The important parts for today are kind of the following. Number 1, do you guys know why you're here? So Jordan as well. Number 2, at some point during this discussion, the board members are going to come up with some suggestion for action, and whatever they suggest, you have the opportunity to either agree with or disagree with. If you agree with it, then we go forth and staff will put whatever they have asked us to do in writing and give it back to you. If you disagree with it, it's your opportunity to say, you know, I don't want to agree to this. I prefer to have a full hearing before the board at a future date. Today, you have 4 of our pharmacist board members, Dr. Rodney Richmond, Dr. Brian Jolly, who's our current president of the board, Dr. Lenore Newsom, who is the chair of the informal committee, and Dr. Clint Boone. And then you have myself, Dr. Brandon McCready, our assistant director, Miss Ashley Vales, who's our legal counsel. Do you have any questions, either of you, about this process before I pass it over to staff to give a description?
No, not at this time.
All right. That I'll pass over to staff.
All right. So I've completed order notice of hearing, kind of outline the allegations and what we'll be talking about today. But respondent Carlton and Criswell, who are in front of you today, were licensed and working at the Walmart in Huntsville. Ms. Carlton, or Dr. Carlton, was the pharmacy in charge. On September 18th, 2023, KE, an 18-pound infant, was prescribed 3.25 mLs of cephalexin. The label on the prescription bottle that was given to her mother listed the incorrect dose as 3.25 teaspoons instead of 3.25 mLs. Initially, it was entered into the pharmacy system, and a DUR check was made by Dr. Moore, who was excused. It was flagged for a high daily dose, and it was overridden by Dr. Moore, indicating that it was a doctor-approved dose. We do not know whether or not, and we don't have information whether or not the doctor was checked on that or notified about that. Later, a 4-point check was completed by pharmacist Criswell, and the error on the dosage was not discovered. And the pharmacy technician went on to fill the prescription. Respondent Carlton completed the visual check, and again, the error on the dosage was not discovered. And then lastly, pharmacist Criswell completed the counsel check, and again, the error on the dose was not discovered. So on the evening of September 19th, 2023, KE's parent administered the first dose of the antibiotic, and she was administered 3.25 mLs. The next day, her parent took her to daycare, and she told the daycare staff to follow the prescription bottle, and daycare staff did follow the prescription label bottle on the bottle, and they administered 3.25 teaspoons. And obviously this was an error and discovered, and KE had to go through blood work and testing to determine if she ingested a toxic amount and if she had elevated liver enzymes. So that is why we're here today to discuss this med error. And we felt like these failures were unprofessional conduct according to board rules, and pharmacists failed to ensure the validity of this prescription dispensed to KE and were negligent in the performance of their duties in violation of Arkansas Code 1792-311A2.
I think just to help clarify, in this process or to summarize, the prescription was input according to the original prescription correctly. It did have a DUR at that time, but then there was a strength change on it to a different strength.
It was actually, they did not have the full strength in stock, and so they decreased it to the 125, but doubled the dose. Is that correct? Or that backwards? They did not have the 125. They had they ordered the 250, and they cut the dose in half from 6.5 to 3.25 mils. The DUR on the front end was overridden by the original pharmacist. He was not there the next day, so he had no input in the prescription the next day. There was not a DUR override the next day because the day supply did not change, is what I understand. So there was not a chance to catch that on another DUR, and I don't know why that wouldn't have happened, except the day supply wasn't changed, and that may have been it. I don't know. Maybe the pharmacist can explain that.
But when the dose changed, it was input at that point incorrectly for teaspoons versus milliliters. And at that point, it was not caught and it was subsequently dispensed to the patient.
It's my understanding from speaking with some people with Walmart that the system actually automatically populates that teaspoon, and they have to go in and change that. And maybe the pharmacist can explain that also. There was, I don't know about counseling. I know the patient's mother said that she did speak with the pharmacist, and then she gave the medication. She knew what the dose was supposed to be, but when she sent it to daycare, she didn't look at the bottle. She said she just knew what the dose was. The next day when it went to daycare, the dose was incorrect on the bottle, so they followed the dosage based on the bottle.
So there was just a one-time dose of the three
There was a, yes.
teaspoonfuls? Okay. And the patient is okay? Have anybody done a follow-up on the patient?
I attended to, made phone calls to the patient and the doctor's office, but they never got back to me personally or us after that incident.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or discussion?
I think it may have been said, but we had the PIC come in because we wanted some sort of explanation of what's being done to prevent this from happening
Right.
again. Although her only participation was in the visual verifier, that the actual product was the actual product.
So who's the pig? Dr. Carlton?
Jordan Carlton, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm the pig.
So I work in hospitals, so I'm not familiar with I don't work with e-prescriptions. But how was the prescription originally written? Was it for 125 per 5? 3.25 mils of that?
It would have been written for the 125 per 5, which was supposed to be given 6.5 milliliters. We didn't have it in stock. The patient waited 24 hours, so we were able to convert it to 125. Or no, we converted it to the higher strength and reduced supposed to be 3.25 milliliters given. And for our system, for that NDC, for the other NDC, it converts it to milliliters or auto-populates milliliters. And this one we converted it to, it auto-populated to teaspoons, which was something we weren't aware of, or I wasn't aware of and did not catch.
So it comes to you 125 per 5, 6.5 mils every 6 for 10 days. But the field for the strength or the dose doesn't populate with mLs, it blows in teaspoons.
Apparently for some NDCs, it auto-populates for milliliters and some it auto-populates to teaspoons. I think that our corporate team has changed this particular NDC to auto-populate to milliliters now instead of teaspoons. But I guess sometimes whenever they get entered into the system, some of them will still revert back to teaspoons, which was something I was unaware of at the time. And now I am aware of.
And on this one, it did populate with teaspoons.
Yes.
That's a significant systems issue. It's not controlled by what the prescriber enters on their side as far as what's received on Walmart's side.
No, as far as I know, I'm not super familiar with it.
Okay. And did you have to order it? Did you guys have to order it for next day?
I believe I wasn't there on the original day. I think they told the patient they were gonna have to order it. We made it, try to contact the doctor to see if we could change it to what we had in stock. And the next day we changed it to the strength that we had in stock, which we had plenty of.
So what changes have you all made to your,
Okay, so I have a little statement here. I can go
Okay.
ahead and read that now. So I've had many sleepless nights due to this dosage error. I consider patient safety my number one responsibility as a pharmacist. And when a patient is harmed directly under my care, it's very disappointing and depressing. This is not the reason I got into pharmacy, and has made me do a lot of self-reflection since this dispensing error occurred. I recall inputting this prescription due to the need for the script being converted to a different concentration that we had in stock. It was an automat of 3.25 milliliters per dose, and did not want a tech to miss the annotation and type it wrong. I specifically remember this script because I even triple checked it as I was typing it to make sure the SIG codes would auto-populate the directions and would input the decimal correctly instead of giving an error. I was unaware that our system auto-populated teaspoons instead of milliliters when using SIG codes for this medication type and concentration. And for that reason, it was something that I missed. While this was a mistake that I personally won't ever be making again, I'm immensely sorry to the patient and their family for any harm that might have occurred to this child. Since then, I reviewed our SOPs with my superiors, made changes to my workflow in areas including input, verification, visual, and counseling to ensure a mistake like this will not happen again. So far, I've done 4 hours of medication error CE and have more scheduled in the future to assist with these goals. I also made personal phone calls to the doctor's office who assumed care of the patient and the patient's mom after the incident to follow up on the status of the child and express my concern for the incident. Yes. So as far as the areas and input, I will try not to, or not type, especially when their technicians are present, so that I can verify and just double check that the teaspoons are not auto-populated milliliters, since that seems to be an issue. And especially at visual, even though it's not standard practice to check the SIG on antibiotic concentrations, but to always make sure that it's still, to try to check it at that last step. And then always reading the full label word for word at counseling. I can't recall counseling this specific prescription at this time. It's been too long, so can't comment on that part, unfortunately.
But the parent did give the correct dose
Yes.
first time, so they,
Yes, she was told the correct dose by my manager, Dr. Carlton, and then she just did not write it on the label. And she gave it to the daycare. No, I believe she called back after she left the pharmacy because she noticed that it said the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's correct. That night of the 19th, she called and was questioning the teaspoonfuls. And so I reviewed the prescription and saw that it did say milliliters instead of teaspoonfuls. So I told her I was glad she called and asked if the patient had had incorrect dose yet. And they said no. And everything seemed fine. I didn't think at the time on insisting that she come back for a new label. I was just so glad she hadn't gotten a dose of the teaspoonfuls. So, but going from here, I'm going to always insist that the patient or their guardian come back for a corrected label.
Yes, it was me.
And who 4-pointed it?
It was me.
So you did your own input and 4-pointed your own. So you verified your own input.
Yes, yeah, something that should not normally be done, and I'll make sure it won't happen again.
And you can, I mean, I guess you can always either back out of that or.
Mm-hmm. Yes, should have done that.
Doesn't your system have a setup so that for certain prescriptions that are high alert, that it always goes to a different person?
I think there's sometimes when that's not possible just due to staffing. If you have the window where there's not a second person, then there are times. Generally, my observation is with this company, they usually do have a separation of those duties unless it just falls in a time where it's not an option.
Well, I understand. And so what I'm saying is their system has the capability of sending it to different people so that it can be reviewed again by another set of eyes. But if it's a store where there's only one pharmacist, then, I mean, at that point, you can just pull a valued technician over or somebody and say, let's verify this. I mean, pediatric population is a high alert population. Cephalexin is not a high alert drug, but certainly the population would call for a cautious evaluation of a prescription. The other thing, and it's not particularly clear, it's kind of long, but it looks to me like the DUR that when the station was started and the station was stopped, that 33 seconds transpired. And that's not quite enough time, it would seem.
For the DUR.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with our DUR system, it only calculates DURs based on the quantity dispensed and the day supply given, which the day supply was 10 days, not 3 days or whatever would have been based off the directions. So the DUR wouldn't have flagged anything out of the ordinary there.
And the DUR check was a different pharmacist, correct? Not here.
And so if this in fact was a different person, and now this constitutes, frankly, the only other set of eyes that are going to evaluate it that way. And they spent 33 seconds doing that. That's clearly not enough time. I mean, we don't need the computer system to tell you that when you read the directions that 3 1/4 teaspoons is too much for an infant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not trying to beat you up over it, but I'm just.
So when you enter in 3.25 into the system, it just automatically populates 3.25 teaspoons full instead of.
Yes, yeah, you would.
Just like a quick
The
sig.
way we type it, you 3.25 Q or BID, and then it auto populates the teaspoons after the 3.25. And some strengths do milliliters.
And this may be a question for Dr. Carlton, but so it was caught, the mother called back. Was there not an effort to relabel the prescription?
Right. So it was that evening that she called, and I was just under the impression that everything was fine. And so I didn't even think about, honestly, insisting that she come in for a new label or anything. I entered all that into the error reporting system for Walmart, and I was just so glad that it hadn't happened. And that is my bad. And that is one way I have changed my practice from here on out.
So the mother calls with a question about the dose, but yet you apparently didn't pull the prescription up on the screen. You just talked to her on the phone.
No, I did. I pulled it up on the screen, and that's how I saw that it was written for milliliters and not teaspoonfuls, because she was questioning the teaspoonfuls.
And that's what I'm
And so
asking. So you addressed it, but you didn't have the
Correct.
mother come back and change the label?
Correct. Yes.
Any other discussion? All questions there?
What's
Yes,
been
sir.
done to keep this from happening again? So this is probably more of a question for the pharmacy than you directly, but you know, if you go into, is there any strength now if you went in and typed 3.25 where teaspoons full would come up, or any indication of quantity other than just that numerical amount?
It's
There probably
possible.
are. Yes. Each medication, each NDC has a preset unit attached to it, and that specific cephalexin, I've gone in and changed the units where it will not populate as teaspoonfuls, where it'll do it as milliliters. But in order, each one comes with its own preset, so you have to manually change each one. And so I'm sure there are still some out there that are populated as teaspoonfuls instead of milliliters.
Dr. Richmond, haven't there been major pushes over a couple of decades to quit using the term teaspoons in the first place because people don't understand that it's technically 5 mLs versus a spoon, a literal spoon.
Exactly, and everybody's definition of a teaspoon or they're not standard. Many of the teaspoons that you eat off of are 3.75 mLs. Then you got the meniscus depending on the viscosity of the liquid. And so the use of mLs would be more appropriate, even if you get a prescription that says 1 teaspoon BID, you would be better served to process that as 5 mLs BID. Well, there are a couple of system issues and then there are also some practice issues.
So go ahead,
Pardon me?
go ahead and say on your verbalizing.
Well, I mean, the system issue, we're talking about teaspoons versus mLs. I mean, that's setting the pharmacist up for failure as a system. The other is that for pediatric prescriptions, they ought to be diverted to a different person to do, to either concur with the 4-point or to review the DUR, something, so that now you have 2 different pharmacists set of eyes. Of course, if you're in the store and it's just you by yourself, then you just got to do what you got to do and just do the best that you can. And you could pull somebody over then to help look over your shoulder and confirm that. I mean, this wouldn't seem to be a too difficult issue for for Walmart to reprogram the system to avoid this problem. And certainly it could be flagged as other prescriptions are to then send it to a different set of pharmacist eyes when the possibility exists. I mean, the other thing is just, I mean, you can't work harder. You're already working hard. So you just have to, for certain drugs, certainly for pediatrics and for liquids, you just have to create your own personal practice standard that for all pediatric patients, I'm going to do the following things. Or, for me, for methadone, there were 5 things that I always looked at for Duragesic. There were 4 things that I always looked at for methotrexate, for amiodarone. So for each drug that poses a potential concern, we kind of develop our own standard, and that's clearly up to you. That's not working harder. I don't doubt that you're not working hard. Just have to work smart and correctly.
Maybe this is a question for Shelley or Grace, but doesn't the pediatric dose flash in orange on the screen when it's a pediatric dose at Walmart system?
It does.
Thank you. So that precaution is there in their system. I mean, it does come up a different color if it's a pediatric dosage.
That's good. Can the teaspoon versus mLs thing be addressed? Can you create a CBL for that?
I think even if it's not a CBL, because a CBL is hard, I'm sure, to develop, but send out a notification through their PIC network to review a pharmacist, probably something they could do.
Well, I mean, they have tons and tons of CBLs, and I don't see that as being a barrier. If you need to alert your pharmacist that this is how you need to address this, I mean, let's assume this is not Keflex, and now this is, I don't know, pick a liquid, Levsin drops, or whatever. Pick something that the toxicity, but for the grace of God, this was not a high alert drug.
And personally, I've discussed with my entire team, pharmacists and technicians, made them aware that every medication has its own pre-assigned unit dose. And so when they're inputting to not just type it up and then send it off, but to make sure that they are looking at reviewing their own work also, and just making sure they're aware that every medication has its own unit dose attached to it if we use those quick SIGs a lot of the times.
I mean, if the system is already designed such that it has the bells and whistles that we're talking about, somehow it was missed, despite the fact that it was on the screen. And so if you need to alert your pharmacist, I mean, the way that you can alert them is force them to do a CBL. For all techs and pharmacists.
Okay, any additional discussion? Dr. Jolly, you were gonna say something? Okay. What was the decision of the board?
Yeah, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, is there any sort of, is this disciplinary or non-disciplinary? Is this,
Non-disciplinary.
Non-disciplinary.
yeah, I don't,
I would personally be okay with just some CE and maybe some of that type of stuff.
well, and he has mentioned that Dr. Criswell has mentioned you've done CE already and you have more planned.
Yes, I've
I
done
mean,
4 hours so far, and I have it's probably about 6 more hours scheduled that I've been assigned to do on medication error.
But I think the system issue is where we're the biggest bang for the buck is here.
Would you want Walmart corporate to get back with Dr. Kirtley or myself with what they're recommending their changes be to prevent this from happening again?
Well, we're recommending that changes be made. What we need to hear back from them is this is what we did.
That, okay. That's
That
about what I
I
meant.
would be
but yeah.
fine with.
Yeah, to me, it looks like on this final page, you can see where it's actually entered in 3.25 ml Q6H for 10 days. To me, that's a system issue of it was put in, if that's what was actually entered in on the third box from the bottom there, 9/19/12/35. Seems to me a system issue that it switched that to teaspoon spool.
I agree. I think the majority of the root cause of this is systems related. I mean, there's a few things that, you know, having an independent double check, but all of us have worked in a pharmacy. We know at times that that's just not possible.
Well, and my concern here is just making sure that it prevents it from happening again. It's
Yeah.
not beating anybody up over it. But the system has the capability of diverting all pediatric. I think it goes beyond just this particular case for cephalexin, but that for any pediatric prescriptions that they be routed to 2 different pharmacists.
Well, but a lot of times there aren't 2 pharmacists in a pharmacy, and to say that we want to put that on a technician, that's not really their role, you know, to say that we're going to have a technician check off on this. I mean, sometimes your pharmacist is your pharmacist, and that could be the only person there for an entire week.
I understand that, but there's also many publications that have shown where that if you don't have 2 pharmacists on duty, that at least having another set of eyes who are at least used to inputting prescriptions, that still serves as another potential catch.
Shelley, what's the policy? I know the system may not be able to, because you guys have probably got, obviously you got a ton of stores and you're going to have times when there's one there. So you can't put in a hard stop that prevents it, but what's your policy?
But if there's a tech.
I know your, or I thought your system has the capability of, for certain prescriptions for one pharmacist to look at it and then another pharmacist. So in the instances where there's only one pharmacist, how does that work? Right.
There's one pharmacist work.
And all I'm suggesting is that that same process be used, but for pediatric prescription. That doesn't close the loop for me.
So we do.
So then we could emphasize, so if, again, we're back to if you already have the bells and whistles in place, but yet there's still things that are falling through the cracks. There seems to me a need to raise the awareness and do education, whether it's CBL or whatever, to make sure that they're following and that they can benefit from the systems that have been put in place.
I think that could just be follow-up back to, yeah. I understand what you're saying about your neurotherapeutic index, you know, that's a hard decision to make to expand that to, because if you make everything high risk, then nothing becomes high risk.
Mhm.
And there's a balance there. And I've dealt with that as well, where, you know, people can make the argument for every drug has a potential side effect, but you know, that just becomes a tough discussion, but I can understand wanting to protect that a little bit so that it doesn't get diluted to the point where it's not as effective, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so what do we want to do? Accept what he done? No action?
At the corporate level, I think we're okay with Shelley and the corporate office reporting back to Dr. Kirtley and Dr. McBrady, corrective action plans and education around it. Is that what? Okay. And then how many hours did you say you did?
I've done 4 so far, but have about 6 more hours assigned.
Okay. Got 10 hours total.
Okay. So just report those hours back.
Above and beyond your required 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just communicate those back at the same time could be fine.
You don't have to have them done by the end of the year. Okay. I would say if you're on a time frame by the end of what, March of 2024.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that'd be fine. We'll put it in a letter and you'd just be able to send it to us via email.
Dr. Boone, did you have any input? Does that resolve it?
So
Do we need a motion?
Yeah, let's see.
that's what I was about to ask.
I'll second that.
You need it reframed or you got it?
We've got it.
Should get it. Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Any nays? Motion passes.
So what we'll do is we'll put this in the form of a letter to send it to you. If you have any questions at that point, either one of you guys, let us know. And that's basically it. All right. Thank you.
Okay, safe travels.
Yeah, thank y'all so much.
Beautiful day to travel on though.
Where's Huntsville?
It's kind of between, it's. I don't know, 30 miles.
So like a little bit west of Branson?
South.
Okay. Okay, well, yeah.
Probably be south, it'd be south. Southwest.
Place if you go there.
So on these, if you just press and then release the actual word push, it'll turn green for whenever you guys want to talk so everybody can hear you. If you want to practice by telling us who you guys are, and then I'll kind of introduce who you're talking to and a couple things about this process.
So my name is Mark Walcombe. I'm an attorney with Anderson, Murphy and Hopkins. I represent Nurse Mallory Williams as well as City Drug in connection with this action, but also with regard to the separate lawsuit that I know y'all are aware of that was filed and dismissed.
Okay.
So this is my client, Mallory.
And then I'm Mallory Williams.
Okay, so I'm John Kirtley. I'm the director of the board, and at this table, just to let you know, on this side of the table, we are staff members here at the board. Myself, Dr. Brendan McCready, who's our assistant director, Ms. Ashley Bells, who is our legal counsel. On the other side, you have four of our pharmacist board members. You have Dr. Clint Boone, you have Dr. Lenora Newsom, who's the chair of this informal committee, Dr. Brian Jolly, who's our current board president, and Dr. Rodney Richmond. Whenever we have these informal conferences for our attorney friends, it's much like mediation. We try to come forth, have even though it is somewhat formal, a less formal meeting to see if the board members can kind of wade through what the situation is and give some suggestion for action. Most important thing for us today is that whatever action they suggest, you can either agree or disagree with. If you agree with it, we reduce it to writing, do whatever it is the board has asked us to do, and go forth. And if you disagree with it, it's your opportunity to instead request a hearing before the full board at a later date, which is all 8 board members, a hearing officer, a court reporter. It's much more like actually going to court. With that, I generally have 2 questions. Do you have any questions about the process and how it works?
None from me.
And I don't have any.
All right. And at any point during this, if you feel the need that you need to talk to each other or you need a private moment or something like that, if you have a question about anything that's going on, stop us, get our attention. We want to try to help answer any questions that you guys have, or if you need to have discussion, we can work with that as well. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our board staff to give us a brief description of kind of why we're here today, and then the board members, I'm sure, will have some discussion.
Staff brought Dr. Williams in for an informal hearing today based on some allegations and complaints, a complaint that we received. Dr. Williams was the pharmacist, or is the pharmacist at City Drug in Paragould. On May 26, 2021, Dr. Vincent Lee faxed 2 prescriptions for 2 different patients of City Drug. One of the prescriptions was for patient AW for temazepam, 15 milligrams, 30 capsules, and the other one was for a different patient for Klonopin, 1 milligram, 60 tablets. Both prescriptions were entered under AW's profile and filled, and they were dispensed the patient was dispensed both the correct and incorrect prescriptions. And she received those through the drive-through. Dr. Williams failed to counsel patient AW or her caregiver at the time the prescription was dispensed as required for a new prescription. Several days later, patient AW discovered that she'd been taking the clonazepam that was not prescribed to her. Later, she had a car wreck, May 29th, 21. She had a car wreck and was injured. She alleges that that was due to her taking the clonazepam that was erroneously dispensed to her by Dr. Williams. That case was dismissed, as Mr. Wankum indicated, because it was not filed in a timely manner, and the lawsuit was then dismissed. And at that point, patient AW filed her complaint with the board. And staff did feel that there was a clear error in this case and brought Dr. Williams in for the informal process to review.
No, essentially, what we would just say is, and Ms. Williams can discuss the specific issue with the dispensing, and I think also she can address the issue of counseling that was raised. That was not something that was raised in the complaint by the patient. Factually, I'll just point out, just for the board's sake, I know y'all don't care too much about the underlying lawsuit too much in terms of the facts of it, but it is a disputed issue. The prescription bottle was never returned. We don't know if in fact the patient did take this medication, how much, if any, was ever taken. There's indication in the police report that there was no finding of her being obtunded or inebriated, intoxicated, or anyway. She wasn't cited for that. There's no indication in the ER records similarly. So there are legitimate factual questions as to whether this is the cause, this medication was the cause. So I know that's not a board specific issue. I understand, the limits of where y'all are coming at. I just want to notify the board of that. Her counsel was aware of this matter for a very long time, and for whatever reason, missed their deadline or filed it late. So that's how this matter was initially submitted to the board. And if y'all'd like, Miss Williams is prepared and can talk about the filling process, how this is, I understand that this happened. And she can also talk about the issues of counseling with regard to this patient, if the board would like for her to talk about those issues in this setting.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I do have just an initial question, just based on what was presented by council. The patient got both bottles. What name was was it her name on both, his or her name on both of the bottles, or?
You're asking about the wrong medications, what you're referring to? Yes, her name was on both of the prescription bottles. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe we've submitted to the board previously a copy of the label that was printed off.
It's in here. Yeah. It's redacted, so, okay.
Yeah, the version we
Yeah,
submitted was not redacted, obviously, but I understand for the purposes of these hearings, we refer to the patient as AW, but yes, in fact, that patient's name is on the label.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question for Dr. Williams. Did the other patient that was prescribed Klonopin, did they ever show up asking for their medicine?
To my knowledge, no, they did not. And if they would have, we more than likely would have said we hadn't seen your prescription, and we would have contacted the doctor's office to have them send it. I do not remember if that patient did come in that day or the next day questioning about that prescription.
That's kind of unusual, because usually you probably could have discovered it had they come on in to pick their medicine up. So that didn't happen. So go ahead and tell us your side of the story. From your viewpoint.
Explain, walk them through
Yeah.
from the prescription arriving, being filled all the way through to the counseling issues.
From what I can recall that day, that doctor's office in particular, when they would fax over prescriptions for patients, they didn't customarily send over like multiple patients within the same prescription bundle. So it would have come through and it would had said 2 pages were coming and both pages would have been for that same patient. And so my staff, that's what they had been accustomed to. And so, I can assume that the staff, saw that there were 2 pages. They were both from Dr. Lee's office, got them together and then they had like folded them and put them in one of our baskets that we utilize for our workflow in the pharmacy. And when they had done that, AW's prescription was the one that had been folded and was on top. So that would have been the first prescription I looked at, and would have scanned them in under her profile and then inputted them. During the check process, typically what we're looking at there is when I get the prescription vial back to me, my technicians have stickered the hard copies of the prescriptions and then they have sent back to me the vial and then the medication they used to actually fill the prescription. So I would have scanned you can see on our label, we have like a little barcode and that's what I would have scanned into the pharmacy system and that would have populated the patient's profile and then the prescription. And I would have been looking to see, making sure my technician put the right medication in the bottle, doing a visual check of that. And then that would have been sent on to the clerks to bag and hang up. That particular day, it was not the patient who picked up the prescription. It was the spouse in the drive-through. And it was still during COVID, so no one was coming into the pharmacy. We were still kind of utilizing the drive-through for a majority of our prescription handing out. And so the clerk, had alerted, hey, this patient has a new prescription. It's the spouse picking up. And I had walked over there and the clerk, I can't say verbatim what he would have said to the spouse, but I know he would have said something like, hey, she's got a new prescription here for the clonazepam. The pharmacist is here. Do you have any questions? Do you want her to go over anything? And the spouse had, said back, no, she's seen Dr. Lee today. He's kind of told her everything, she needs to know. And so at that point, I would have made sure my clerk stapled our patient education to the front of the bag, which is normal procedure. And then I would have walked away and let him finish the transaction at that point.
So this happened a while back, didn't it? Almost 2.5 years ago?
Yes.
Okay.
Just for the board's clarification, I mean, once it was notified, Ms. Williams was notified of the issue by Dr. Lee's office. I believe it was within 2 days, I think, after when the accident happened, maybe within a week, Dr. Lee's office contacted. So they were aware of this fairly short time after. So it's not like this one was filled, nothing happened on it, no one knew about it for a year. So that's probably one of the reasons why I think we have specific recollection of the circumstances of this one.
Do you know how many days prior to the unfortunate accident that the patient had, who had notified the patient that something had been dispensed to her in error? Was it the doctor's office or was it the pharmacy?
From my understanding, the patient wasn't aware she had got anything incorrect until she had went to the doctor's office after the accident. And
Okay.
that's when it was discovered.
Okay.
Excuse me. So when Dr. Lee's office had contacted us about it, it was them who had come across and they had called the pharmacy and I had spoke with the nurse and they said, we see that this was dispensed. We didn't prescribe that for the patient. And so that's when I had pulled up the record of the patient and looked at the prescription and looked more closely and said, oh, yep, I'm so sorry. We made a mistake. It was supposed to be for this other patient. They asked for us to discontinue it. So we did. We had the conversation of the patient returning to the pharmacy with the bottle. The patient was still in the office and they said they were communicating that for the patient to return back to the pharmacy with the bottle of medicine. I had told them we needed to count it. We actually have a disposal box in the pharmacy. So I said, we can dispose of that for them. And then we can make a count and make note of, how many were actually taken. And at that point, we were expecting the patient to return and the patient did not return. Matter of fact, the patient never brought the prescription bottle back to us.
And all of that was after the motor vehicle accident.
I believe in terms of timing, Dr. Jolly, I believe the prescription was filled on the 26th, and I believe the accident was on the 29th, I believe.
Okay.
There's a notice in here from Pharmacist Mutual that they paid for her MRI. Was that the only reimbursement to her for medical expenses or anything like that? Do you know?
Dr. Williams wouldn't have knowledge on that particular thing. There were discussions back and forth with her counsel well in advance of suit, discussing this and trying to see if we could negotiate a resolution of this issue prior to suit. I believe they might have made a payment under the MedPay type coverage sort of for the MRI. And that MRI was quite a few months after the accident.
The letter's dated August 4th. The MRI was a month later. It was June 28th
Yeah.
of 2021. But I was just curious. I know normally when you have a liability claim and you contact your insurance, I mean, I'm always aware of I've had a car accident before and I'm aware of what was paid from my insurance to the person that was involved in the accident. I was just wondering if this was the only
Yeah, I think
reimbursement
that
to the patient.
I believe that might have been, and I have to double check with Pharmacist Mutual on that one,
That's
but
fine.
I don't recall exactly. I know obviously as to the liability aspects of the coverage, obviously no payment was made because there's no legal liability because frankly, the statute of limitations
Okay.
bars the action because the matter was filed too late.
This was long before the end.
Yeah,
of
there
the
were
statute.
discussions, obviously, as is often the case in tort litigation, whether it be a malpractice case or automobile accidents between the insurance carrier and the claimant. Obviously was not able to reach a resolution prior to suit. Then when they filed suit, they filed it too late. And so obviously separate issue from the legal perspective.
So you said the prescriptions came through together. You assumed that they went with one patient. Now you're aware that every controlled substance prescription requires a patient's name and address and that you can't change that. Now, you agree that a different patient's name was on each of the two prescriptions?
Yes, it did have a different patient name on each of the
Okay.
two. Yes.
All right, so it was there for you to catch.
Yes.
Okay. And the first thing for a patient to get a prescription, first it should be for them, right?
That's correct.
Before you get to any clinical consideration, allergies next, should they ever get the drug, before you do anything else. But first and foremost, you got to get the right drug to the right patient. Now, you said regarding counseling, irrespective of whether this was drive-through or not, you said that the conversation would have gone, your wife has a new prescription. Do you have any questions for the pharmacist? You realize that Arkansas has a counseling law that requires counseling on all new prescriptions.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so an offer to counsel does not fulfill the law.
Correct.
So to ask somebody, do you have any questions? That's not counseling. Counseling would be, your wife has a new prescription, it's for Klonopin. It's never been on her profile before. She used to take this twice a day. That would be counseling, right?
Yes,
I mean,
that's correct.
it could contain many other things, but it's very different. Do you have any questions for the pharmacist? That's an offer to counsel. But in Arkansas, there is a requirement to counsel on all new prescriptions and any refills where professional judgment calls for it to be done.
Just for clarity, for Dr. Williams, as we sit here now, removed from this, do you have a specific recollection of the conversation with the patient? Or are you doing your best based on?
I mean, I have not
That
spoke to the patient.
interaction.
I never had an interaction with the patient. She was not the one picking up. It was a spouse. I mean, she did not have a caregiver. So, best I could have done is communicated this to the spouse. Now, whether that they're able to go home and communicate that to her, I can't speak on that. Even when the incident was brought up to our attention. We did reach out to try to speak to her after she hadn't shown back up that day from the doctor's office. We did not get a return phone call. The patient herself has never reached out to us, and we have never been able to directly talk to her since all of this occurred.
So that's all assumption and after the fact. But focusing on what the responsibility is as far as this board's concerned, is that you prospectively have a duty to fill a prescription for the right patient, and that you have a responsibility to counsel patient on all new prescriptions. So you can't predict whether or not, had you done that, that it still would have resulted in the same thing. I mean, irrespective of whether or not it was her or her spouse who picked the medication up. Had it been counseled, then perhaps it's a possibility that she could have caught it. I certainly know what my spouse's prescriptions are.
Yeah, I can't speak to if the husband would have been knowledgeable and knowing every medicine that his wife took.
Okay, but you acknowledge that it is responsibility to fill a prescription for the right patient. And you acknowledge that you have a responsibility in Arkansas to counsel on all new prescriptions.
Yes,
Okay, and in this case, neither of those were done.
I did make the error, yes.
And the patient had an offer to counsel.
What the patient did not have an offer to
Okay.
counsel. The
The
spouse
person who
did.
picked it up had an offer to counsel, but they weren't counseled.
Correct.
Okay.
So what happened? So when you did go to the window,
Uh-huh.
what happened at that point?
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Sorry, I'm. Like I said, I can recall that it was the spouse that was picking up. I do not know if we were super busy that day. I can't remember all those aspects, but I do remember that the clerk said to him, you know, something along the lines of, if she has a new prescription, she was getting 10 things that day. And I mean, I can't say specific, you know, I just know he said, no, she's talked to Dr. Lee today. She doesn't know anything. I don't know that the patient's in the car. She's not there. I mean, I don't willingly give out information about patients to just whoever. I mean, we have situations where other people pick up medications for people. And so, you know, I don't go through every detail. And it wasn't even her in the vehicle. Should I have given more information? Absolutely. But that is not the case. I mean, the spouse says no, but she doesn't want to know anything. I don't want to know anything. I mean, what more am I supposed to do at that point?
So, does the patient still use you all as a pharmacy?
No.
Would you like some water?
Oh, thank you. I have some.
Or have you done anything in your pharmacy to change how you receive prescriptions?
Yes. So once this incident occurred, we kind of counseled our staff and the pharmacist, and we quit combining faxes together to begin with. And so we just said, you know, from now on, let's just not, even if you think it's the same patient or it looks like it, let's just separate them. So we did that. But then since then, we're now doing the e-cloud faxing. So we don't even have paper faxes anymore come through the pharmacy. So with e-cloud, every image you have to go in and manually, you know, type in if it's a prescription or just a document for a patient file, and then you have to pick the patient name. So it's, you know, even more looked at. And I guess you could say we have an extra step in there to make sure that it is going into the right patient.
Could you explain for Dr. Newsom the changes that have been made with regard to notification for counseling?
Oh, yes. So, you know, at the time, the pharmacy software we use, it has an alert when a new prescription's done. So it will pop up to request yes for counseling, no for counseling. And then since then, we've kind of utilized little colored tags that say counsel really big on them. and then an option for notes. So that way, like when I'm in the process of filling a prescription, if I have something I need to talk to the patient about or have a question about something in particular, we can make a note and then it goes in the basket and hung up and we'll call with the bag as well. And then that also helps if, you know, I wasn't the pharmacist on duty at the time and another pharmacist was working and had seen my note, they would know, oh, okay, this is what, you know, was the question or what needed to be discussed.
Thank you.
So you're still offering to counsel. You said it either comes up yes or no, and if it says yes, you put a counsel. If it says no, you don't put a counsel in there.
If it's a new prescription, most of them, I think, and I can be misspeaking on this, but I think it offers yes or no counseling on every transaction. But if it is a new prescription, we have one of those colored tags in there so that we do go and speak to the patient.
So you are counseling on
Yes.
every new prescription.
Yes.
Then? You're not letting a patient say, I don't need counseling and leave.
At this point, no. After this incident, no.
After today or after this incident?
No, after that, the incident back in, yes.
Yeah, I know with our system, which seems to be the same one, it, even on refills, a patient can request counseling. Even if it's a refill prescription, they can request additional counseling and it's just a box on the signature pad.
And Dr. Williams, whenever, what you're talking about here, are you saying that when a clerk is dispensing the medication, there's a prompt in the software that notifies the clerk who's dispensing the medication, hey, I need to go get a pharmacist to do the counseling that you mentioned, in addition to the separate place in the tag that the pharmacist does during the filling process?
Yes, we have that where we can set it in so it'll prompt up that, I mean, like we have to put a pin in to go past the sale of the prescription.
Any comments?
Sorry, what was that?
Any more comments? Has everybody had a chance to look over everything adequately, the medical record and everything?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is the will of the board?
Two things I would ask for are the things that Dr. Williams has outlined already that was done in remediation, that you memorialize that in writing in a letter to the board regarding your dispensing process and the counseling process. Just put that in a letter. And then 10 hours of continuing education above and beyond the usual CE on issues related to prescription errors and patient counseling.
Second that.
Well, I would just,
I didn't know if that was a motion.
Or you want to put that in a motion?
well, I don't know if there's anything else you
Is there
all.
anything else you have?
No.
Anything? Did you have anything? Dr. McCready?
I don't like making medication errors disciplinary because it drives the reporting of them under the table. So I don't like seeing, I mean, unless something is just done with malintent. So, I mean, there was no malintent here, so I wouldn't see this as a disciplinary issue. Now, I don't know if there was a fine to recoup costs of investigation, and does that constitute then disciplinary? I don't know. That's up to you all, but I wouldn't want to see it disciplinary.
If
I
it
don't-
was investigative cost, it could still be non-disciplinary. The difference we have seen in the past with disciplinary or non has been around reckless activity, basically.
That's what's gonna be I don't see reckless
No, I don't see that.
behavior here. I don't have anything to add to your recommendation.
I would make the motion that we asked for the letter outlining remedial changes that have been made. That 10 hours of continuing education related to medication errors and patient counseling. So not 10 on each, but collectively that 10 be on those two topics. And it be non-disciplinary.
And you gonna put that in form of a motion?
Yes.
All right, we've got a second, by Dr. Boone. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Any nays? Motion passes.
So what we'll do, we'll reduce that to writing to send to you. So if there are any questions or follow-up for implementation, generally when they are talking about like CE requirements above and beyond, it's not something that you have to get done in like the next 30 days or something. Previously today, they basically said till the end of March. So it gave about a 4-month window. If you have any trouble finding those programs, we can help you with that as well.
That'll be over and above any continuing ed you already have as your baseline license.
Any other questions you guys have? With that, thank you for coming in. This is, I know, no fun for you, like it's no fun for us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm good.
Morning, guys. I'm John Kirtley. I'm the director of the Board of Pharmacy. I'll tell you who you're talking to at this table real quick, a couple things about the process, and then have you guys introduce yourselves as well. Quick housekeeping on our microphones where it literally has the word push. If you push that firmly with your finger and release, it'll turn green, which means go for these microphones we've got here today. Also here at the front table on this side, we are staff members, myself, Dr. Brenda McCready, who's our assistant director, Ms. Ashley Vales, who's our legal counsel. On the other side, we have 4 of our pharmacy board members, Dr. Clint Boone, Dr. Lenore Newsom, who's the chair of our informal committee, Dr. Brian Jolly, who's our current president of the board, and Dr. Rodney Richmond. You guys want to tell us who you are?
I'm Brian Crownover. I'm manager of regulatory affairs for Best Vet Solutions Incorporated. Ryan Thorson, director of manufacturing for Best Vet Solutions.
So in this process, we call this an informal conference. In many ways, it's like mediation. It's just a good opportunity for us to sit down together and informally, even though it's fairly formal, talk through any questions we have, applications, oftentimes disciplinary issues or anything else. At the end of this, what we generally have is after we have a discussion, the board members will come up with some advice or some plan of action or some opinion. And with that, it's something that you guys have the opportunity to either kind of agree or disagree with. If you agree with it, then that's what we go from the informal committee. If you disagree with it, it gives you an opportunity to then request a hearing or an appearance before the full board at a later date. With that, I will turn it over to staff. I think Dr. McCready give a brief introduction, just kind of why we're here today, and then we'll open up for discussion with the board. Thank you.
See the application we received the application in June. When they filled out the application under methods of distribution, they checked that they shipped directly to veterinarians. And they also checked other, and I asked for an explanation, or it asked for an explanation on another sheet. It says the other falls under products shipped directly to veterinarians, but always call it out for transparency. We do ship products to poultry integrators with veterinarians on staff to the DBM's attention. Arkansas requires that products be shipped directly to the provider that holds the license, and therefore we brought them in to discuss this issue.
Okay, do y'all have a statement?
So our desire and intent would be to be able to distribute animal health RX items, primarily water soluble products, pot pen, oxytetracycline, Tylosin type products to veterinarians that work directly for corporate integrators, and then direct the distribution or the dispensing of that product where the veterinarian would manage and dispense that product to corporately owned flocks for use after their diagnosis with those flocks. That's our intent and our purpose and how we would intend to do business.
So when the order comes in for the medication for whatever location it is, it may not be the DVM's actual physical office location. It would be the office or the location of the integrator. And the DVM may or may not be there at the time that the product is received, correct?
It would be distributed to a corporate facility that the veterinarian has authority and authorization and frankly has purview and direction over that facility. So it will be distributed for that veterinarian's use.
I think the issue, and Brian and I've had meetings over the years on these, especially since our, kind of our precedent setting case with it was the Ibesco case, like in 2002 or 3, even before I was here. In these situations, we've had times where there's a gigantic facility that has a full-time veterinarian on staff that has an office, but he may have an office in 3 different buildings that have different addresses. And I think that we've worked through in the past where if they have a actual office there that is a place of business that the veterinary board will be aware of, that it could be shipped to that office. But then we've had situations where here's a herd of cattle or a flock of chickens basically in a house. And even though the veterinarian goes by there periodically, it's not an actual work place for them.
A grower versus the corporate facility. And we would only be shipping to the corporate facilities, not to growers, not to end-use farms.
So, and that was the big issue with Ibesco was when it was basically a grower producer, that it was a stop by and then say, hey, send this over there and let the farmer dose it. In these cases being corporate facilities, veterinarians have an office there on site.
They have an office and they're responsible for the management of the medication.
Okay. And so it's basically the real question is if they happen to be at another part of the facility or another facility that day where they also have an office, is it okay to ship to that one where they do have an office? Would that office be on file with veterinary board? I mean, or could it be?
It could be, yes.
Okay. That's all your main concern? And Brian, I'm sure you know, because you've been in this industry a while too.
Sure.
We get a lot of these questions where people are like, oh yeah, it's that. And then the next thing you know, it's going to, a guy I went to high school with that did FFA and has a
Yes, sir.
handful of cows
Yes, sir.
that they're like, oh yeah, the vet has an office here. It's like, no, he had a car here,
Yeah,
not an
exactly.
office.
Yeah, and we validate the corporate veterinarian's license. The corporate veterinarian gives us direction of where the product's to be shipped under his authorization. So
Are there any sales reps or anybody that place these orders for the vets? Are they placed specifically by the veterinarian?
they would be placed by a corporate purchasing agent typically.
Are we talking about FDA approved drugs only, or is there compounding?
No compounding, no narcotics, only animal RX,
Yeah, all
no
commercial.
human. It would be typically water soluble pop pen, oxytetracycline, chlorotetracycline, Tylosin, water soluble products for flock health.
Okay, but I heard you say no human drugs.
No human drugs at all.
I mean, we were just discussing, I mean, it is different because this is all wholesale.
Okay.
So in wholesale, if a veterinarian has another member of their office, they often would be able to help file wholesale orders. If it was prescription only, the vet would have to issue it, or an agent of theirs to issue it specifically on a veterinary order for prescriptions to be ordered.
So have they answered all the questions that you all need?
I think so. And the funny thing is, we get in the office a lot of questions along these lines that do not have these answers. And it's kind of like in our applications, I have people all the time that say, what am I supposed to say about, am I going to counsel patients? I'm like, you're supposed to say you're going to counsel patients. They're like, well, I am going to counsel patients. I'm like, well, that's the right answer. I said, but some people don't answer it that way, and it becomes a major issue for us. But I think with that, we just have on the record, for this one, since some of it we deal with, we can't get these answers, that yes, this is what we are looking for.
So I just need a motion to approve the application. Yep. I need a motion to approve this application, please.
I moved.
Dr. Jolly,
Second.
Dr. Boone. Okay, have a motion and a second to accept Best Veterinary Solutions Incorporated application for a pharmacist license in the state of Arkansas. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The motion passes.
Thank you all for the opportunity to come before you today.
Absolutely. And if you'll hold on before you leave, I think we can get you your permit.
Thank you. Are you all today?
I don't think Jennifer had to turn us back on or anything. I think we're on. Should be right there. All right, make sure all of our YouTube Zoom feed is working. So, morning, everybody. I'm John Kirtley. I'm the director of the Board of Pharmacy, and I'm going to tell you who you're speaking to at this table and a little bit about the procedure, and also have you guys introduce yourselves. On this side of the table, myself, Dr. Brenda McCready is our assistant director. Miss Ashley Vales is our legal counsel, all staff members here at the board. The other four members here at the head table are pharmacist members of the Board of Pharmacy, Dr. Clint Boone, Dr. Lenore Newsom, who's the chair of our informal committee, Dr. Brian Jolly, who's our current board president, and Dr. Rodney Richmond. You guys want to tell us who all you've got today? If you, hit press, release, it'll turn green, which means go. Yeah, it's the actual push. It's kind of weird.
There
you
it goes.
go.
My name is Seth Wilson. I'm a pharmacist for Collier Drugstores. Next to me, this is Curtis Cumby. He's our IT person. Next to me is Miss Fayon Johnson with Therap. And then behind us, Mel Collier, owner, and then Josh Schrader, CEO.
So we're here today. You guys had an application for, well, let me back up a minute. In the informal process, generally, we treat this as a less formal method of dealing with an issue with the board. One of the main things that we kind of have designed this process for, similar to what you have today, is a request to consider central fill. And in this process, after the discussion, the board members will have some motion for action. It could be come back later with more information. It could be we're denying it. It could be we're approving it. That's just kind of the whole gamut of what it could be. And you guys have the opportunity to either agree or disagree with whatever suggested action they have. You agree with it, we go forth with whatever they have instructed us to do. If you disagree, it's your chance to say, you know, I don't know that I got a fair shot at this. I'd rather appear before the full board at a later date and set up a meeting in that manner, which is all 8 board members later on. Any questions about how the process works? Okay. So with that, board members have just received their packets on their devices this morning. Under tab 4, you'll see that we have a request from Collier Drugstore to do central fill dispensing and check-in processes. They can give us some descriptions of kind of how they're wanting to model this. And I believe that Ms. Johnson is it Thera? And there is it's the software connection for the systems. I know that we're going to want some information on you specifically, since that's a different type of software I don't believe we've approved before. That would have to go with whatever the board says. My anticipation would be they're going to have a staff kind of overview of that before it could be approved as well.
Okay.
So Seth, do you want to tell us kind of what you guys are trying to do as described in your application?
Sure. Thank you. So we're presenting 2 separate things today. The Therap integration, which is for potential our long-term care pharmacy, and then in addition to that, separately, we're doing the central fill pharmacy request. So first, with the central fill pharmacy, we are requesting to be able to fill, obviously, medications out of a singular location. We would do a pre-check essentially at a retail location, PB1, and then that data would be electronically transferred, pulled over to a central fill location, which would use automation in order to fill. And then that would be kind of the PB2 check, where the pharmacist who's running the central fill location would be responsible for essentially the visual. And then it would be either distributed to the patient from there or sent back to the retail location for essentially pickup. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Would y'all like to talk about that first and then transition over to
that's probably the easier one of the two. So you've got, is it 10 locations? Yeah, I mean, it looks like listed, it was 10 locations, and you're wanting to basically set up Cave Springs, at least for now, for your central fill location?
That's correct.
And have you guys, I don't recall, so I'm asking out of ignorance, have you already gotten approval previously to do like offsite order entry for various locations?
We do have offsite order entry. Yes.
I thought so. So it's basically, they've already had approval to do some workload balancing or sharing, which we're agnostic to which facility that comes and goes from in a conglomeration of pharmacies. But you're wanting to do central fill, and I'm going to take it one step further with technology. So a couple of clarifying questions I would generally have. Non-controls, controls, everything.
Non-controls only.
Okay, non-controls only. And when you said the use of technology, what type of technology are you looking to try to take advantage of?
So we'll be using a Parata to be able to help that process. So it'll be automation in the filling process, but we'll also have some additional, not necessarily hand counting, but maybe use of icons for additional drugs that would be going that wouldn't be in the larger machine.
So right now, you're only looking at like single drug per bottle or dosing, or are you trying to look at multi-dose?
We would have intentions to do like strip packaging as well.
Okay.
With the machines. So that would be in the plans too.
So what machines are you using for that?
I think if I'm not mistaken, the Parata machine.
There is a version of Parata that does.
The Max 2s.
Okay.
And then one of the ATPs.
Okay. Yeah.
Verifier behind that.
That's what the other thing I was going to ask, and for our board members to clarify, the verifier has, I mean, a pharmacist is looking at the strip, but the verifier will actually even help identify that, on this strip, here are ones that are flagged because the pills are sideways or partially covered or anything like that, that will actually draw your attention to double check those, because it can help identify like broken tablets even. So it's
like an icon, basically looking at the strips that they go through. It identifies the ones that are having problems, basically. It brings that to the attention of the pharmacist.
So the pouch packager has multiple, it's got different medications in the same pouch. It's like all the AM meds, or is that?
Yeah, so different than when you generally see a pouch packer, it's a repack single pill thing or a cart or something. In the retail side, for straight retail patients, assisted living, it is not approved for long-term care because of the many changes in it. But the strip packs are multi-dose strip packs. So, we describe them as M&M packs, but they're larger than a lot of what you probably see. And they would have specific designation on the strip as well as on the box. We usually would see stickers that would describe what all pills are in there and the instructions for those pills. But then on the strip, it would literally say like 12/5/2023 AM dose or 8 AM or whatever the specific instructions are for that. So we see a lot of utility and have been very supportive from the board side of that, because if you have especially dementia patients, people that are struggling with memory care, anything like that, did I take my medicine this morning? Well, it's 12/5 and the strip that's on there is for 12/5, it's for noon. So I took my medicine, or I must have missed it last night, or mom missed it last night, because it remains on the package.
So the meds are co-mingled in the same little pouch.
They are. And so they already have like we have an MOU process because you could allege that drugs are potentially misbranded, or which is the main thing. We've had people say adulterated before, but because there are multiple medications in a package with limited space of signage, some people have in the past said, well, that's going to be a problem with it potentially federally. So what we did, some boards just say, hey, this is price performance, you can do it. We did an MOU so that you're able to basically say, yes, I agree to the following criteria. They're not putting PRN meds in there. They have to have a policy if they would include any controls in multi-dose packaging, which they're talking about really only doing the non-controls, which keeps it cleaner for that.
Are you doing new fills from your central location, or just refill? Is it just refills that you're going to do?
It would be potentially both. We would go through a pre-check process before it would be sent over to the central fill location to ensure the entirety of like the check process, the DUR review, and all of that. So it could potentially be new prescriptions, but predominantly it would be mostly refills.
Yeah, like time sensitive stuff like antibiotics or.
Correct. So if something were to be started at the central fill station, and the patient shows up at the pharmacy, they have the potential to pull that back and fill it at the store instantaneous or immediately in order to be able to ensure that that gets done in a timely fashion for the patient.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So do you all have a shared database or do you have to just log into each store for where you're doing fill for, or how does that work?
Or basically the store is picking that to go to adherence, and then that gets pushed to the central fill basically. It's like the central fills in that store, kind of like a robot, SPP. Robots basically, it's just at a different location. The store still controls basically what goes to central. There's a different inventory. For the store level, and then basically in the beginning.
Yeah, so the individual retail locations will still have the responsibility of initializing that fill. And then at a certain time of the day, that would get pulled over for the actual filling process. But it would be the same process up to that point at the retail location that you would normally see if they were to fill it there. Except at that point, then the actual putting the medication in and the visual verification process would be done offsite.
So the local store kind of controls the routing of where it goes.
Yes.
So you've kind of set up a inventory, probably an SP2, but that's shared inventory. Like all locations are probably going to see that same centralized packaging, Parada machine or whatever it is that you're using. I mean, is this any different from things we've approved in the past based on y'all's review?
No, it's very similar to what we've approved in the past. It's, they've already been doing offsite order entry. It's funny because at times we have especially smaller groups of pharmacy entities that don't know exactly where they're going to end up. So a lot of the times we'll have them come and say, we want to get central fill approval that includes offsite, and we right now are mainly going to do offsite, and our hope is to grow into central fill. And that's kind of what Collier's is doing here. They've kind of tried one, but when you look at the investment in that type of technology, I mean, the robots are not inexpensive, and trying to meld them into a current store that's already busy, it's a whole different type of workflow and mindset in that. So if you isolate it to a separate facility and just go like, here's where we do this thing and have, specially trained people just to handle that, it works better.
Eliminate a lot of waste and inventory costs and
get everybody on MedSync with it. I mean, what's interesting is the patients, the families that wind up getting this type of packaging system. Like if you told them they couldn't get it anymore, they freak out. It's not good.
And we're hopeful that this offers a better patient experience and frees us up to engage more with our patients too. That's ultimately the goal with this is, to improve the ability for us to have that face-to-face interaction and offer that to patients, which if we're, busy engaged in the filling process at the stores, that limits us and what we're able to provide in that.
How do you measure that? Y'all do patient satisfaction scores?
Not as a survey that I'm aware of. No, not at this point.
So, Dr. Curley, you said we got the central fill thing, but we also have the computer system.
Yeah, and I'm not completely up on it. So I would take central fill as an individual, basically application for approval.
Okay.
And staff's fine with it.
Fine with it? Okay. Let's entertain a motion for Collier's central fill program.
Motion to approve their application for central fill.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Motion by Dr. Jolly, second by Dr. Richmond, that we approve their central fill process. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Now, let's see part two. That's
So-
the
So you tell me, what is Thera?
Thera?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Sure. So TheraP is a national EHR. We specialize in providing services for organizations that support individuals with disabilities. We have a full suite of modules, including an electronic MAR, and we do things like billing. We do things like community service documentation, goal and service documentation, and we are also the state mandated EHR system in several states here in the US. For example, South Carolina, Tennessee, Delaware, just to name a few.
Mandated for use where, like in state-owned facilities or?
No, in both state-owned and private facilities that provide services for individuals with intellectual disabilities.
Right. So if we're talking about an EHR, when I usually hear that, it's in relation to the aspect like a facility can use whichever EHR that they want.
Right.
So I'm imagining these are people that are in some institution.
Not always, no.
Okay.
Sometimes they're at home, sometimes they're
Okay.
in group homes, sometimes they are in institutions. So it varies.
And so the request is to integrate with Collier specifically. So Seth, how is it your store or is it other stores? What exactly are you guys trying to do with there?
So my goal, I run the long-term care pharmacy for Colliers. I have a potential candidate that they have about 60 patients. Half of them are ICF and the other half are in group homes. And they currently use TheraP for their software. And so after speaking with them, they requested to have some form of integration to be able to streamline things for their services, to be able to offer a more, safe way of transitioning that information over. Because right now, anytime they have a new order, they're having to go in and manually enter that, which takes obviously time for them, as well as if there are changes, anytime you're going in and manually doing something, it opens up a potential door for an error. And so after speaking with them, it's their hope that it will improve like their time management, their accuracy, and then basically we would just integrate with the patients that choose to use us with them in order to be able to provide that for them.
So you would be able to retrieve orders through their app, or just you're helping to input for their MAR for administration?
It would be more on the inputting side. The doctor's office would still transmit the prescriptions over to us. Whenever we type that in, that information would then be essentially shared with what therapist seeing, or I'm sorry, with what the facility would be seeing.
Sure. Via TheraP.
Via TheraP, exactly.
Okay. And for the TheraP side, one major concern, or a couple that we generally go through on these. So does TheraP have the ability to connect to multiple pharmacies? So if I'm taking care of these 5 patients, Dr. McCready is taking care of those 4, Ms. Vale is taking care of the others, like they can all integrate. It's not just a one-off, only you.
Correct.
That's a good answer, because we've heard no many times on that. The other thing is, and this gets somewhat more technical, we have rules where like the pharmacy can't just buy TheraP for the facility, but the pharmacy may have cost included on how it will cost you some of the coverage of TheraP to be able to use. So is it something where you're paying for the whole facility to use it, or are you just paying like a shared fee?
Sure, I can elaborate on that. The facility pays to use TheraP and they will determine what modules they wish to use, and there's a subscription fee for that. For any pharmacies that wish to participate, we charge an annual subscription fee. It's a one flat fee, and they can interface with as many organizations or individuals that they want.
I like that.
So just to be clear, the TheraP system is not used for dispensing purposes, but really maintenance of the MAR.
Correct.
So does that really fall under our purview, or does that fall under?
Well, it does, because if it's the pharmacy that has a direct link to it. So it's the EMAR could exist on its own without the pharmacy having linkability to look at it or to make changes to it within a long-term care, assisted living, group home, or anything else. It's no issue. The moment it wants to actually link and interact with the pharmacy, other than just sending prescription orders. So you could have an EMAR system that would be a electronic health record to just send prescriptions. That's one thing. But the moment that Seth or Collier or another store is interacting with the EMAR to help make changes, load information from it, pull information, from it or for it, then it precipitates technology use with the pharmacy.
Does that just simply fall under regulation 12 or is it?
It falls under regulation 12, but it also falls in some ways, you could have a conflict with offsite order entry because it's not with a pharmacy. So what we've done is say this system, much like we do with technology for the pharmacy processing system, this system is approved for use as described or as presented before the board. Because the other link that we've gotten into specifically on this, which their app is not saying this, we've had facilities that say, well, every patient in the facility has to use a pharmacy that connects to this electronic application. However, this application will only connect to one pharmacy. So it creates a situation where it violates the patient's freedom of choice because there is no choice at that point. You know, we have facilities and we're dealing with several of these situations right now. You have to use our pharmacy of choice, which we're connecting to our EHR, or pay an extra $250 a month. Well, I can't tell the home, I don't have authority over the home to say you can't charge people if they don't use your pharmacy of choice, but I can look at the pharmacy of choice and go, how are you in an agreement with this home that they're fining people money if they don't choose you and they have a both federally protected freedom of choice with Medicare for providers, because most of them are Medicare or even Medicaid feds, or their own private pay freedom of choice. So I'm sure it's seen as a barrier, but we have made sure that we do not approve systems that are going to violate the freedom of choice under the unprofessional conduct side, or that are technology that doesn't have the ability to help exercise that patient freedom of choice or connect to multiple locations. And then you also have the rule that we've seen where sometimes it is not generally within our state, but out of state, it's, well, if you'll use our pharmacy and direct your patients there, we'll cover your EHR. And I mean, you've probably seen people that would offer that. It's like, right. In some states that's allowed.
Right.
It's, you know what, we're going to have a selling point as a pharmacy that whatever long-term care facility assisted living uses us, we include, because they buy all their drugs from us, we just give them their EHR and we give them their med carts and we give them their fax machines and we'll give them computers and robots and everything else. In Arkansas, given there's a whole federal, anti-kickback discussion that we have with that. But for us, if the pharmacy is supplying the med cart, the home is the one who's getting the use out of it and they have to purchase it. And we're academic as to if they want it on a payment plan or upfront payment or whatever. Those are just kind of the ways that we have tied in the HR solutions.
All right, so you guys have got a pharmacy software. Just make sure I understand it. Whatever the proprietary software is that you have for your stores. This is an interface between that software and the Thera software.
Right.
Is it bidirectional or just like, can you share information back?
So at this time, the interface is in production unidirectional.
I would think that would be maybe potentially a good thing, especially if you have multiple pharmacies that you can accept information from to prevent any type of sharing of information for a patient that's not the patient of the store.
Correct.
So I had that as a question. Other question was, so if a patient chooses not to use the pharmacy that's connected, they can still use a pharmacy that's not interfaced with Thera.
Absolutely.
In the group home or the ICF facility.
Correct.
Any other comments?
Dr. McCray and I are having a sidebar that, I mean, we for the file would want to see, some slides or something showing us exactly how it functions, because we've always done that. But outside of that, the verbal answers that Ms. Johnson's been able to give us, we're satisfied with the major concerns the board has directed staff to investigate on these.
Okay. Do you have a PowerPoint or something?
I can actually show you the application.
That's even better.
Okay.
One more question while you're pulling that up. Do you guys enter into a BAA? Y'all have a business associate agreement that you sign from a HIPAA standpoint?
Yes, that has to be completed before any interface will take place.
If it's, if you want, we can, and knowing this is a public meeting, this will be on YouTube, that other people will be able to see it as well. We have a thing where we connect and it'll pop up on our TVs.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there a network that I can connect to, or it's fine if not? Yes, but I need. This one? Yeah. Okay. Do you want to go into it first? Is there a different device? I can connect from anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That'll work.
Right in the middle of the floor.
No worries.
While she's getting logged into Dr. Curley, I just want to clarify as well. This is the half ICF, half group home is just for one organization in particular. I also have some other organizations in mind that have patients that are more in like the community setting. They're overseen by caretakers. They're developmentally disabled most of the time. They would still potentially be like using this software in the future as well. So I would like that to also be considered too. So.
I think we would be fine with that from at least the staff side. I imagine the board would agree as well. The other thing is I can tell you that if their app gets approved, it's a selling point in the state of Arkansas, and you will have other people that will want to use it at that point.
Patient's not in, so independent, I guess.
So basically they have like day centers of some sort as well, but yes, they do have like day centers. This one organization I have in mind, where their patients often will come throughout the day, but obviously they're not going to be at that center for each time that they're passing, meds. So they do have caretakers that would generally come into the home. It kind of varies patient by patient, but that would be someone within their organization that would come and help to administer those medications for those patients. Potentially. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but I wanted to make sure if that was something that we wanted to branch into, that was something y'all were aware of.
All right. So just a disclaimer, this is obviously a sandbox and a demonstration account, so they're not real individuals or medications. But it looks and feels almost exactly as it would in production. Our application has, in addition to the interface, I mentioned a variety of different health tracking modules, and all of this is access controlled. So the individual provider can determine who can see what information and even what modules and different data points. This is the medication administration record. I'll show you sort of the finished product, and I'll show you how Colliers would interface with it. But long story short, for the appropriate persons, they're able to come into the application, head over to the MAR, and click on record data. Because the MARs, as I said, have a vetting process, if that has not taken place, if the interface, for example, is not in place and they attempt to access the MAR for the individual, they'll get a warning that says not available. Again, this is all access controlled. So depending on what profiles or clients they have access to, they can toggle back and forth between the locations. And then assuming all is well, and they attempt to document on that MAR for a particular facility or individual, it opens up and it looks something like this. It has photos of the individuals, ID numbers, the actual medications. Let me close that. So the actual medications are listed here, controlled substances be documented, the counts can all be done here. And in essence, it's sort of point and click. They'll come into the appropriate medication at the correct time to indicate that they've given it or mark it as on hold or so on and so forth. For the interfacing portion, instead of creating these entries manually, so if I was not, for example, using a participating pharmacy, I always have the option to manage that MAR by entering information into the medication history. So this is what they are currently doing. They are coming in here and they are filling out this medication history form, whereby they're going to go in and they're going to indicate the prescriber, the prescription number. We do have access to what's known as First Drug Data Bank, so they are able to come in here and cross-reference formularies if they have NDC numbers and such. But in the absence of that, they can always go in and manually indicate medication name, compound drugs, administration details, route, method, etc. Any questions about the manual entry so far? When it comes to interfacing, there is a little bit of setup that would need to take place one time on the provider end. What they are able to do, in addition to determining which pharmacies they want to connect with as an organization, is they are also able to dictate what they wish to be notified of. So for example, as an organization, I can say, I want to be notified when there are refills, when prescriptions are filled, when they're canceled or otherwise modified. And then they can prioritize those notifications as well. So in this example, I have new orders and discontinued orders, high priority, change and on holds as medium and so on and so forth. And all of the options that we offer are listed here on the left. And that will vary based on the proprietary software that's being used. Yes.
And then on pharmacy to discontinue that order? That part of the interfacing?
Well, when the pharmacy discontinues the order, that notification is automatically sent to the provider. They have the ability to review that, and that will modify the medication on the market.
That's typically.
If I get notified by the doctor's office that something has been discontinued, sometimes we'll get, in our system, it pops up as something called a critical external MTM, but it'll be basically a cancel order. At that point, I would cancel, or if I obviously get notified in a different manner, sometimes doctors will put it on like an RX note on a particular prescription, say they were on one SSRI and they switch them to a different one and it says stop sertraline, then we would discontinue that order. But it wouldn't be something that we would just do without cause, if that makes sense.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking is in retail. Alcohol could stay active. I guess my concern is, are they gonna have meds on their mark? I guess in some ways it's controlled by what the patient actually thinks. So maybe that's okay. I'm just used to a MAR span. So when I think about this MAR, I'm like, well, I'm gonna stay up to date with new orders.
I bet. Yeah, I bet both sides could stop it. If you're in a facility, if you're in a facility and the clinical faculty on staff in the facility know there's a discontinuation, then they would generally stop it on there. The goofy side to me is in community pharmacy, we hardly ever hear stop giving them that from a prescriber. It's whoever's ordering it goes, and by the way, we don't need metoprolol this month.
But you are correct, it can be stopped on either end. So yes, again, they can set work list priority as far as what they wish to be notified of. Once that is set up, we do also require a verification process. Because in theory, this individual exists in our application and they exist at the pharmacy, we do what's known as a patient linking. So as part of that interfacing process, when the pharmacy begins sending data, and I'll share some examples of what some sample data looks like. The pharmacy is also sending a patient ID. The pharmacy determines what that ID is. It can be, for example, concatenation of their name. It could be I'm not sure how you guys determine patient IDs, but the long and short of it is the pharmacy determines the patient ID. In this particular example, it's displayed in this column called linked individual ID, and we have IDF 19014. And what the provider must then do is pull the profile for, in this case, Brenda Jones in TheraP, and then compare it using that ID number to the demographic data and profile that exists at Collier's or whatever their respective pharmacy is, and verify that there's a name match, date of birth, gender, address, phone number before any of the information will populate over to our system. And that's obviously to present mismatches and having information in the wrong place. But once they are linked, then it will display that match for the pharmacy individual. This is pulling right from your system to the information that is displayed here and there. So we do have a verification process before they can begin interfacing or using those MARs. This is an example of what the data looks like when it comes in from the pharmacy. So it'll indicate the individual's name, the pharmacy that it's coming from, the account in TheraP to which it is going, the individual's ID number, and then the actual data. That will include everything from patient demographics to when it was dispensed at the pharmacy, the medication information, the pharmacist that signed off on it, the prescriber, including the NPI and or DEA number, and then of course the prescription data as well. And you can send everything over from non-drug orders or supplies if needed, if those need to be documented and tracked on the MAR. The amount of data sent is determined by the pharmacy's software, and it can be everything from start and stop dates. So to answer your question, if it's valid for a year, it would never show up on the MAR for any longer than that because that end date would be there. And so this is what, again, that sample data looks like. How many refills, the packaging information, et cetera. This particular part, I can't quite show because we can only do it in production, but it's the actual notifications. When the provider signs into their application, their default landing page is this to-do tab that will highlight anything that requires their attention. If there are, billing forms, attendance, or in this case, pharmacy documentation, there would be a line item here that would say pharmacy messages, and it would indicate whether there were 2 or 10 or 100 of them that they needed to go in and take a look at, and they're able to access them directly from here. Since I can't show the notifications, I obviously can't click on this link, but I can show you what that process looks like, assuming they're working right from that notification. I'll pull one and show you what I mean. Okay, so here are messages that have come in. Typically, when the messages come in, the notifications are real time. There is no delay. When the pharmacy puts in that new order or they DC that medication or whatever the action that they're taking, it shows up on that user's dashboard immediately after it's been verified by the pharmacist. It will come in as follows. So it'll say, for example, Joseph Mitchell has this particular drug, starts on this date. It's a new order by this particular doctor. And I can see that that status is pending acknowledgement, has not yet been reviewed by the provider. When I click on it, it opens up. At the top, we will group all messages for a particular prescription together. So over time, they can see it was ordered on this date, refilled on these dates, ultimately canceled or changed on another. And of course, here's that data from the pharmacy throughout that message. At the bottom, the provider has 2 options. They can simply acknowledge receipt. Thank you for letting me know that it was refilled. I don't need or want to take action on this. Or they can then acknowledge and create, and that is the action that transfers and updates that MAR. So when I acknowledge and I create it, it takes me full circle back to that medication history form, but I don't have to fill this out. It's got all of my pharmacy data, including the prescriber, NPI, prescription number, medication with the respective drug details link. So the electronic formulary, if you will, generic names, pill images where applicable, indications, precautions, contraindications, as well as my administration details. So this is a multi-sig. You can do those as well. So if you need to split the instructions or even split the schedule, you can. All of that information will come over. And then all they have to do to take this to the MAR is go down to the bottom and approve it. So in general, from getting the message to having an updated MAR, assuming they don't want to make any modifications, it's under a minute. Does that answer any questions that you might have, or is there anything else that you'd like me to review?
You've answered all my questions. We're good.
Thank you.
Okay.
So their
Are you
request
guys, I
now
was
is,
gonna ask you, are you guys gonna do this from the central field, or are you gonna have it integrated between all of your stores?
This particular thing would be out of the long-term care pharmacy.
Oh, okay.
This would
I
be
forgot
my,
about
this would be my location that I predominantly oversee, because we're a little bit more engaged in this type of workflow. So the only thing, that the long-term care or the central fill might be doing in this is potentially filling some of the medications themselves, but all the interaction between Therap and our software would come out of the long-term care pharmacy.
I mean, if they had patients that were especially homebound that wanted to do multi-dose, the front end work is done in a pharmacy. That's academic at that point. But if it was a packaging issue, then they could use their central fill to get the packaging done centrally.
And I'm assuming if we're gonna approve there today, they can use it wherever they want to.
Yeah,
within their-
the limitation that we have generally said is, we only allow things like offsite order entry in the community, retail, long-term care side within the borders of Arkansas. So you couldn't be in Chicago and use this for Arkansas facilities because of the offsite rules. We're having some struggle trying to explain that to people who have passed our law exam and understand that there are limitations to offsite. But, in this example, it would be fine. But there could be used in other facilities or for patients in Arkansas, but it's within the state of Arkansas, not outside the borders of Arkansas. And so really it's, Ms. Johnson's request is for Therap to be approved, and their request is they want it approved so they can also team up with her and use it. We would give a letter, if you guys make a motion to approve it, we would give a letter to Therap recognizing that they are an approved EMR system to be used as presented in the board meeting. So we would add them to our list of like 4 or 5.
Okay, sounds good. Does any board member have any more questions? Okay, I would like to entertain a motion on approval of the Therap system, please.
Motion to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Motion by Dr. Jolly, second by Dr. Boone. Any additional questions? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, motion passes.
All right, we will reduce that to writing if we can get your contact information as well, we will be happy to send, Dr. McCrazy, we'll be able to send you a letter reflecting that. Be sure you close out all your stuff though.
I did.
All right. Anything else? I think that's it. And I think we're done until 1 o'clock then.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Safe travels back on. Nice.
I'm just gonna, I don't know if it needs to be ejected. That's good.